Yeah, and then there have been quite a few people who have told me that. I've actually had someone who told me that they were racist, or you know, so that particular person had experienced some bad. Their first encounter with people of color wasn't good. You know, they had gotten beat up, by somebody of color, and that's pretty much one of their first experiences. And then after that, they just started, looking at people of color in a certain kind of way. And he started identifying with, some of the other white people who were hating African Americans at that time. And there was one individual whom I want to say was a close friend. I don't say a close friend, but had became a friend of the family. And that person was a person of color, and they were kind of cool with this person, and it kind of started changing, his mindset. Uh, and he opened up a little bit, and then the more he opened up, the more he kind of was like, you know what, it ain't all black people, that's like that, um, and that was a white person. And then I also know of a black person who uh, one had experienced a lot of racism in his youth, alongside his mother, and had been one of those individuals who had been mistreated by law enforcement, and he started uh, looking at white people in a certain kind of way, you know, but there was yeah, it's crazy how similar their stories are. There was a individual, a white man who was cool with everybody in the neighborhood, back then, took care of all the kids and, including, him, looked out for them, bought them ice cream, took them to the park to play, bought them things and stuff like that or whatever, and then that kind of opened up his mindset. You know what? It's not all white people, So, these prejudices, man, you shouldn't be, prejudiced towards entire groups, man. I mean, I've known Asian women who, you know, would be fine, of their own, thought process with, dating, um, an African American person. However, uh, they could not bring an African American person home to their family. Their father, and this has been in quite a few cases where, you know, the father would almost disown them, if they brought home a black man because we're perceived a certain kind of way, whereas, oh, if you bring home a white man who makes money, everything's fine, and there are black men out here who make money, which is why, you'll see me refer back and forth to different classes a lot, because there are, the exception, individuals who make really good money or whatever. um, but yeah, those prejudices are out there, you know even in the Latino community, there are, I've known Puerto Ricans and Dominicans who looked at Mexicans as if they were dirty, you know. And I've known that, coming up, a lot of my Latino friends would look at Mexicans a certain kind of way, and be like, oh, they're not even like us. They're different from us. They're dirty, and that's messed up. You got some awesome Mexican people out here. I got Mexicans in my family. I also have Puerto Ricans and Dominicans in my family too. But, those prejudices, and then it's kind of crazy because I've known some of these people, when they got older, to actually marry Mexicans. So, that's pretty interesting. But, there's your prejudice, just, jumping to conclusions, judging people. You don't really have no experience, you're going based off of word of mouth or whatever you've heard on television, seen on television, whatever, or read off the internet. is crazy. And even with, all right, so I'm gonna give an example, and this is kind of messed up, but I'm just being honest. So there's other forms of prejudice too. There's prejudice of you know perceiving that a person could be prejudiced, or could be racist, or whatever. So, like for instance, fact, I've experienced this a lot. A lot of other African Americans have experienced this. When you go into a store, right, and you're walking around and you're being followed, you know, excuse me, for whatever reason, or for no reason at all, or you're walking down the street and a woman clenches her purse, when she sees you coming, or you're walking down the street and, someone crosses the street, to avoid you. As a person, that's messed up. I'm not gonna lie. I felt a certain kind of way, like that. And it had gotten to the point where I would start perceiving people. If I was in a similar environment, I myself would be prejudiced to the point where I would be like, you know what, this person is going to feel uncomfortable. Like before I got hurt, I was I could walk pretty fast, pretty much range walk everywhere, and I started perceiving that, if I seen a white woman in front of me or whatever, she's going to feel a certain kind of way if I come walking up behind her, which me walking fast, I kind of just want to blow past and keep going, minding my own business. But I would perceive that she may feel a certain kind of way about a tall black guy walking up behind her, or what else have I thought of? Yeah, or the flip side of that is, okay, well, now you got a tall guy, a tall black man walking behind you at a slow pace as if you're being followed. You know what I mean? So I'm perceiving that somebody else is going to perceive me, in a messed up way. And then there have been similar cases like that where I've just crossed the street, so that individuals don't feel a certain kind of way, don't feel threatened or anything like that, Um, and it's messed up. You as an individual, as a person or whatever, you shouldn't have to alter, who you are because of someone else's prejudices. But at the same time, you shouldn't let, the prejudice of some, determine, or create prejudices within yourself. So I'm guilty of that, myself or whatever. Sitting there taking other people into consideration and saying, hey, you know what, they may discriminate against me or be prejudiced against me or racist against me, or they may, look at me a certain kind of way, which is the prejudice part, and think something and is not that at all, but I shouldn't perceive, those individuals like that at all, and then it backfires because there have been times when, let's say, a Caucasian woman to be broken down on the side of the road, and you sit there and you drive by, and you be like, dang, I wonder if she needs help, but then you be like, who would take it? You know what I mean? Like, you be like, if I roll up and say, hey, can I help you and stuff like that? For one, people aren't that kind these days. So it's out of the norm just to do that in general, which is messed up. And then two, if I'm rolling up, to help her out and stuff like that, how is she going to perceive that? And then three, even if she perceived it just fine, what if somebody else, who was passing by, perceived it the wrong way and, came at me the wrong way or whatever, so it's a shame that, even in helping people, that there are prejudices involved in stuff. There was an incident, is on YouTube somewhere, where a white grandmother was driving. She was either driving her black grandson to work, or he was driving her car, but they were taking him to work or from work, something like that. And allegedly, somebody called it in as a black man, kidnapping a white lady or something. Although supposedly there was an investigation and there was no proof that anybody made that call. But when the police pulled the car over, they treated, the young black man a certain kind of way, cuffed him, threw him in the back of the car. Guns came out and all that stuff. And then when they checked on the lady, she was like, "That's my grandson." You know, same thing with my uncle. So, it wasn't the same issue with him, but my uncle was a tall black man. I want to say he's a bit darker than I am. Very strong, fit, muscular black man, and his granddaughters are Puerto Rican. And one of them, they have different shades of skin or whatever. They you got a really really light skin Puerto Rican, a middle shade, and then dark skin. And while he was in in the store or something like that with the light skinned granddaughter, you know, and she was throwing a hissy fit or something like that, and then you got people looking at him, and then it's like, yo, there's this tall black guy with this, very, very light skinned child, Yeah, I mean, so people perceive certain things like, and even he felt a certain kind of way, even though that's his grandbaby, he was like, you know, he felt as though, people may look at him like maybe he's kidnapping her or something like that, so it's crazy. But yeah, so prejudices, we all have them, some more than others. Some have them in more of a hatred kind of way. Others, not so much, All right, so then let's go into discrimination. So discrimination, all right, there's a couple of different definitions, but the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, and sex. All right, so there's a lot of us that experience discrimination. You got homosexuals who experience discrimination. You have people of color who experience discrimination. You have people who experience discrimination within their own ethnicities. There are all kinds of forms of discrimination. The way that the justice system is set up. Like I've expressed in a previous video. Where certain people are treated, a certain kind of way, and then others aren't. You have people who have money who commit heinous crimes, but they get away with it, and then you have people, who don't have money, who commit, nonviolent crimes, petty crimes, stuff like that, and they get hammered, by the justice system or whatever. You have people who live on one side of the tracks who get treated a certain kind of way when they get pulled over by the police during a traffic stop. And then you have people on the other side of the tracks who get treated totally different, And a lot of that is on the grounds of race and class, So if you're a poor individual, and I mean, if a cop will be honest with you, if you got a cop in your family, they'll probably be honest with you. If they can be honest with you, they'll tell you, if you got money and you can afford a lawyer, or if you got money and you got any kind of status of power or know people who's important, you're going to be treated, totally different than somebody who can't even afford to post bail, And so the whole system, like I said, I don't know if it was in this series of videos or if it was in another video, but this whole system is built on, racism and other issues, and it's not just race, but that's why talking about race is important, so we can identify these things and we can deal with them accordingly. Discrimination, if you're a pedophile on this side of the tracks and you're a pedophile on this side of the tracks, y'all both should be treated equally, right? All right, you have, there are a lot, is ridiculous. There are a lot of current cases where Caucasian individuals, I wasn't going to say males, but I've seen like one or two recent cases where there have been females as well, Caucasian individuals who have committed rape. And I'm talking were caught in the act, or DNA evidence was left behind, the person admitted, whatever, they were, they've committed rape, and have gotten away with a slap on the wrist, and you have people who have of different ethnicities, even who have money, who have faced harder sentences, and wasn't given, a break like that or whatever. You have people who are serving more, I don't say more time, but they get harsher punishments, for animal abuse, which I'm not for animal abuse, but I'm just throwing that out there. You got individuals out here, who are committing rape and practically getting away with it, and that's not a fair justice system. You got people, who get busted with, I don't know. I'll use this as an example. My kid's Play-Doh thing. They can get busted with this much cocaine on them, this filled to the top, with cocaine on them. And you can have an individual, who gets busted with, I don't know, let's say 5 or 6 crack rocks, and that person with the 5 or 6 crack rocks is going to get more time than a person who has this much cocaine on them. Anybody who knows anything about that knows that crack is broken down. Even though there is cocaine in crack, the majority of it is cut up so much that you maybe have 5 to 10% of actual cocaine in a crack rock, and then everything else is like what is it? I want to say baking powder. I don't know if it's baking powder, but some powder and whatever other kind of crap they throw in there. So, but you get more time for that. Why? Well, crack is more of a low income, affiliated with the negative image, of what drugs do versus cocaine, so on and so forth. That's discrimination as well. You know what I mean? So there are literally laws that are based off of discrimination, and racism and classism and so forth. Then you have internalized racism. So internalized racism, a lot of us refer to this as self-hate. A good example, if anybody has ever seen the TV show Boondocks, with Uncle Ruckus. Uncle Ruckus, his character is a prime example of self-hate. I want to say it was the Dr. Phil show. There was, and I don't know if that was real or not, because I was watching it and I was just baffled. But I watched the skits on YouTube, so I didn't see the whole show. But there was a girl who was black, but she identified, or she hated her own race, so she wanted to identify as a white person. Or she hated African Americans. A lot of what she said was a lot of the prejudices that are put out there by other ignorant people or whatever, and she didn't want to be affiliated with that. Well, I don't know if that particular case was real, but I definitely know that I definitely have known of cases like that. And then there was the woman it was a white woman who passed as a black woman. Now I haven't heard her. I would have to look into it, but I haven't heard her necessarily degrade degrade white people as a race or anything like that. It is what it is. Now, and I've also had in some of these discussions and some of these debates and stuff like that where, there were white people who, one were, reasonably educated, and knew the differences and things like that here and there, and, wasn't spewing all that hatred. And then you had, individuals who's throwing their prejudices left and right, And I've heard this from a couple of different people, that is racist individuals like those who make them embarrassed to be white people and that they wish they weren't white. Look here, it is okay to be white. Okay, there is nothing wrong with being white. There's nothing wrong with being black. There's nothing wrong with being Latino. There's nothing wrong with being Asian, American, Native American, Arab, Middle Eastern, whatever. You're born how you're born. Somebody else's ignorance and stuff like that shouldn't make you feel less of a person. You know what I'm saying? Or make you feel like your whole group of people is just messed up. It shouldn't create a prejudice in your mind about your own people. You know, the way that things are portrayed about my people in the news and stuff like that. As far as African Americans, oh, y'all killing each other. What was it? There was a gentleman who posted something online about and this isn't the first time he's done it, where supposedly there was a news coverage of an immigrant. I want to say he was like an illegal immigrant or something like that. He wasn't supposed to be here, or something, whatever, who had committed murder. He likes to point that out, and saying that he was like, hey, another one, to where like, oh, this is why they shouldn't be here or whatever. Okay, so I responded with a different news category of a Caucasian person who had committed murder. And I was like, okay, so what's your point? Like, people of different ethnicities and, whatever, commit crimes. And he was like, oh, don't make me go to the Chicago Tribune. Like, oh, because a lot of black people are committing murders in Chicago or whatever. And I'm like, you can do that if you want. I guarantee you I can find, more cases of Caucasians committing murders and genocides and so on and so forth than you can find of black people, committing murders here in the U.S. or whatever. And it's not to say that white people are evil. We all have histories. Our people's, our backgrounds aren't all beautiful. If you know anything about history, there's been a lot of war, there's been a lot of back and forth slavery, so on and so forth. But I'm not about accepting, that white supremacy mindset, like, oh, we're better, because of this and that or whatever, and these people shouldn't be here. That white nationalist, mindset that, oh, these people shouldn't be here because of this, because of that, whatever, when is not really founded on anything except maybe the fear that, that you might be losing power in this country or whatever. Self-hate, God created us all in his image, so that should tell you something. What I mean? He created us all in his image. We are perfected art. We should love ourselves for who we are. Don't let anybody else define you, so on and so forth. I mean, unfortunately, the way that the system is set up, there is, we are going to face prejudices. We are going to face discrimination. Some of us will face racism. Like I stated earlier on, there are supremacy groups that are out there, not just white supremacists. They're the majority, no doubt, but there are supremacy groups out there that aren't white, and you should, be yourself and love yourself. There's nothing wrong with being you. Now, those of us who can love ourselves and love each other, need to come together to do something about the way that this current government system is, the way that this system that is built on prejudice, that's built on discrimination, that's built on white nationalism, that's ran by white supremacists, that allows racism. We need to come together and do something to make a change about this system of government. And that's thinking outside the box, which I'm gonna make another video about that. But there's no reason to self-hate. If you want to, again, like I said, in regards to interracial relationships, whoever you fall in love with is whoever you fall in love with. There are many of us who are mixed, and don't even know it. There are racist, white people out there who have, African blood in their bloodline. There are prejudiced black people out here, who have Caucasian blood in their bloodline. Is stupid. You know, your skin color, you know, doesn't determine, it shouldn't determine, you know, anything, you know, how you're treated or, you know, anything like that, you know. Your actions and who you are as a person should, and we need to get back to that. So me talking about racism, there is a reason for this, and it is politically related. Yeah, so you have the self-hate people, you know, love yourselves. You have the people who identify as another race. All right, so this is a big deal. This is a big deal. So it has been successfully done where light skinned people who are not Caucasian could pull off acting as if they were or living as a Caucasian. It has been successfully done by African people, African Americans. It has been successfully done by Latino Americans. And I really should wait. Yeah, I should do this part in part three so I don't break it up. But I'm definitely about to dig into transracialism or you know whatever, but identifying as another race.